Hey everyone, this is Ms. Fisher, and this is a help video for the Survival Guide Part 1. So during class, we talked about the first example, and this is Activity 2, two function calls. So these are considered our tests for our student-developed function. In this case, this first example, we've got this function definition, which takes a parameter, and depending on what is passed as the input, we call it the argument here, it will make this first condition either true or false. So we use the first example of 2012, or the year 2012, and we can see that when we plug in 2012 for year, 2012 less than 1955 is false, but 2012 greater than 2011 is true. So this part is true. That makes the entire expression evaluate to true. And because of that, we're going to actually execute this part of the function, right? Lines 5 and 6. And so what that does is that it will ask the user to type another year and display an image. This is the question mark image. Now, suppose that this is false. I'm going to go ahead and highlight it red. So if it's false, which is what it evaluates to, if the year is 2003, let's just take a look to make sure you understand why it evaluates to false. 2003 less than 1955 is false. 2003 greater than 2011 is false, and so therefore false or false evaluates to false. That means that we're going to skip the if block and we're going to actually execute the else block. So I'm going to highlight this one, and we are not going to execute the top here. Okay, so we're going to skip this top because this is false, and we're going to execute this lines 10 through 22, which is basically filtering the original album image list, displaying, and then displaying the image and title from that given year that the user inputted. Excuse me. All right, let's go ahead and take a look at the second example. This parameter takes a list of elements, so we're going to assume it's a list of integers or numbers, and it wants to find the maximum value. So we're going to assign max to the first element in the list. We're going to assume that it's non-empty. There's at least one element in the list. And then we're going to traverse the list. That means we're going to begin at index 0, and we're going to go until I is no longer list.length. In other words, we're going to go until I is equal to list.length minus 1. That's the last element in the list. And if this is true, we would execute this block right here. So in this case, if we put in the numbers 3, 2, 1, let's think about what's going to happen here. So the first line of code, we're going to assign max to the first element, which is 3. So here's my variable max in memory. And we're going to go through this list, 3, 2, 1. So, is the first item bigger than max? So let's take a look at, this is index 0. Is 3 greater than 3? Nope. So we're not going to execute this block of code, which is just line 5. Is 2 greater than 3? Nope, that's also false, right? This is also false. Is 1 greater than 3? No, that's also false. So at no point during the traversal of this list does this block of code get executed. All right. So when we call on find max 3, 2, 1, the condition tested by call 1 is this condition right here. So I'm going to type that in our paragraph. The condition would be list if list I greater than max. Always evaluates to false, okay? Because the first element is the biggest number of the list, it's not going to be bigger than itself, and it's not going to be bigger than any of the other elements. I mean, it is not bigger than self, and none of the other elements are bigger than that first element. So this will always evaluate false. Well, let's take another example. What about 10, 11, 12? So if we take a look at 10, 11, 12, the second call, we're going to go ahead and first is line 2. This is important. We declare a variable called max, and we're going to assign it the first element here, which is 10. Okay. Now, is 10, 11, 12? Is 10 bigger than 10? Nope, it's not. So we're not going to execute this line of code. But what about 11? Here, we've got now, is 11 bigger than 10? Well, that actually is the first time we've seen in this example where it evaluates the true. So now we're going to replace the max with 11. What about 12? We're going to go ahead and increment I. Is 12 bigger than 11? Well, it is, and so we're going to replace 11 with 12. And then we return 12, which is the maximum of the list. So if we go back to our guide here, if list I greater than max evaluates to true for the second and third element in the list. Okay, so the result of call 1 is going to be that the first element in the list is returned, which is 3. And the result of call 2 is that the last element in the list is returned. In this case, it is 12 because it is the biggest number, where it has the greatest value. Okay. All right. Let's go ahead and look at the last one. So for this one, this function checks if the game is over, and if the score is more than 100, it's going to hide all the enemies and run the end game function that shows your final score. So we've got to check. This is the condition right here we want to check. All right. So we want to think about one parameter that makes it true and one parameter that makes it false. Okay, one argument. When you actually call in the function, that parameter is called an argument. So here we can think, okay, well, if I call on check end game and I think about 101, right, that's going to make sure that this ends up being true. So then let's think about one way of making that condition evaluate to false. Well, 100 is not bigger than 100, so that's going to make it false. So the condition is here, if score is greater than, if 101 is greater than 100, evaluates to true. And the second one would be if 100 is greater than 100, which evaluates to false. What's the result of call 1? Well, when it evaluates to true, this is all going to, actually, let's do it in green. This is all going to be executed. Okay, so lines 4 through 8 are executed. And what does that actually do? Well, it actually tells you here what it's going to do. Let's see, there are 3 enemies are hidden, and the end game, and the game ends, and the game ends. That's what the end game function does. What happens if it's false? Well, nothing, no commands are executed when condition is false. All right, basically, check end game just checks if it's the end, and if it is, it's going to, hide the enemies and end the game. But if not, it just basically will proceed to the next command wherever you called on that check end game. All right. Okay, I hope that was helpful. And if you have any questions, just let me know. All right. Bye, everyone.